Hello and welcome back to New Paradigm Healing. This series focuses on Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy. Our intention is to educate, inform, and support the conscious and responsible use of ayahuasca in the Western context. If you want to know more about Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy and our upcoming trainings and workshops, sign up for our mailing list to be the first one to know about the latest news at avatarhealingarts.com. Hello and welcome to our audience. Lots of love to you. This is Izel with Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy podcast. And I'm very excited today because I have Darren with me as a guest. And we connected a while ago, and we just really resonated. He currently works with SoulQuest, the ayahuasca church in Florida, and does integration work. So I think we have a lot in common. So it's the first time that we are connecting as well. So it's a little bit of get to know for us, and I hope that you all get a lot out of this episode. So welcome, Darren, and so nice to have you here.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Awesome. So you sent me that 2 podcasts that you already been on before, and I listened to the podcast, and I'm gonna, if you don't mind, we can include the links for our audience to listen to your story, because I think it's really worth listening. I was really touched by your whole story, but we don't have the time to repeat the whole story, so we're gonna include the link. But just if you want to start with just kind of a little bit of summary of, just your life, where did you come from and how did you ended up, coming to plant medicine and this specific medicine, the Mother Ayahuasca?
Yeah. So I'm 46. I think I'm 46. You forget your age after a while. I think I'm 46. But I had been, I had suffered from clinical depression for 30 years. My parents divorced when I was very young, and I was so close to both my parents, and they were just beautiful people and just wonderful people. They just weren't right for each other. And you start to tell yourself a story, and I'd suffered my entire life. I'd done really beautiful things. I was in the Peace Corps, I was in the Army, I was a journalist, I worked for Men's Health. But I had just suffered, and my whole existence was through the lens of this suffering, and through seeing myself as a victim, and through depression, and the idea that everything was hopeless and nothing was ever going to work out. And in 2012, my mother got stomach cancer, and she passed very quickly. And that was the first, or maybe the second dark night of the soul that I had in my life, where everything just breaks, everything crumbles, any belief that you had, any foundation breaks. And from that, I just spent the next 7 or 8 years trying to recuperate. And at the time, and then in 2019, my father passed. He took his life. And when it was happening, I was in a suicidal state. I was depressed. I couldn't help him. His wife was passing of Alzheimer's, and he was trying to be her caregiver. And there was a lot of other stuff going on. We have a stepbrother that was really attacking him and trying to take things from him. And my father felt abandoned, and I never abandoned him in the sense that I didn't agree with him, but I just, I wasn't able to be there for him because I knew that I was drowning and he was drowning, and I would have drowned him worse and maybe made things worse. So I had to step away from him, and it ended up that he passed. And right then I knew that if I didn't do something, I was going to take my life. I had attempted it before, and I knew that darkness, and I knew I didn't want to live anymore. I'd lost the 2 most important people in my life. And I found the book, How to Change Your Mind, about psychedelics, how they're being used in mental health therapy. And I found it, interesting enough, everything is serendipity. It was serendipity how I found that book. But I found it, and I read the studies, and I instantly had a feeling, how they say that ayahuasca or mushrooms, it works before you take them. And that's very true. And I had the feeling that this is what I need to do. This would have saved my father. This will save me. I need to do this. And I started studying mushrooms. I found Terrence McKenna, who is a brother to me. These people, they're online and they become your family. Terrence McKenna, Ram Dass, all these people. But I found Terrence McKenna, and he spoke about how to take the mushrooms. And I found the John Hopkins psilocybin study. And through serendipity, I found a person to get me mushrooms, and I took 7 grams of a mushroom called penis envy. That if you know that mushroom, that's like taking 14 grams of a regular mushroom. And that night, everything changed. I was able to let go of so much trauma. I saw the perspective of how things were. I understood things for how they really are, not through my own ego. I had the most profound ego death, one of the most profound ego deaths. And that night changed everything. And, you know, it's not like the next day I woke up and I was like, great, let's attack life. I was really lost. And I had to go integrate that experience. And then from there, I found ayahuasca, and I did healing through ayahuasca, and I worked with mushrooms some more and MDMA. And then I found iboga. And this was a 2-year journey. You know, we talk about it in that podcast, but I found iboga, and that's where I found the ultimate healing was through iboga. I mean, each of these plants, they broke away a little bit of that armor that, you know, is our hell, that encapsulates us. And it kept breaking, and then iboga shattered it. And then from there, it's funny, from there, I always say that's where my real work began. You know, you think it begins when you take the mushrooms with ayahuasca, but no, you really, once you break through all that, you realize, oh, wow, okay, here's the work. You know, I start studying Advaita Vedanta and Taoism and Buddhism, and some of these deep teachers like Osho and Ram Dass and Swami Satchidananda. And I found a practice, and I found answers. The Bhagavad Gita, it was all there. It's always there. It's in everything, you know. But I found a practice, and I found answers, and from there I do my work today. I work at Soul Quest. I'm an integration coach. I work privately with people, and I work at another retreat center called Awaken Your Soul, which is an iboga retreat. And then obviously I do other work. I work in accounting, but you know, yeah, my work now is just this practice. It's constant practice.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, we always talk about in this podcast, our audience is familiar with that calling that you are describing, you know, that the medicine calls you, any plant medicine, but especially with the ayahuasca, I think that you just know somehow, you know, on an intuitive level, that's not a logical or reasonable kind of thought, but some kind of feeling, you know, very strong feeling that is tell you this is the way to go. And I definitely salute you, you know, for that heroic dose the first time, especially that, as I remember from the podcast, like you didn't have experience with psychedelics before, no? That was like your very first experience. So going in kind of totally virgin and just taking the huge dose of mushrooms without kind of guidance and a sitter, and without people, you know, to hold you in that moment. So yeah, just salute you for that. And yeah, I definitely agree that the plants work with you before you actually ingest them. And I always say to people that, you know, the moment you say yes to this journey in your heart, you know, that inner yes, that the spirit of that plant is working with you. And that's why it's important that we do have preparation as well, because I feel, you know, with my clients, a lot of material arises to the surface before the actual ceremony. It's that part of that work that is already being done. And once you commune with the plant on a physical level, I feel that it's part of you forever. I don't know if you feel like this, that it's like the mother, and all the plants I took are part of me, and I can access that energy, you know, anytime without actually ingesting the plant. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You know, what you said about the things that start coming up for you before you work with the plant, to me, that's everything. That's absolutely everything. I mean, as an integration coach, I always tell people that we have to do this manually before you work with the plant, because I've seen so many people work with ayahuasca or mushrooms and nothing happens because they block it. They block it. They want the plant to do all the work, but the plant won't do the work. The plant is just a guide, and we have to do it manually. And so I agree. All of that is the real, you know, the real juice to do the work, and then the plant does the rest, you know. But yeah, these plants, you know, I don't, I definitely, yeah, I just love them. They're beautiful. They're beautiful teachers and beautiful spirits, all of them. Cannabis, you know, garlic, whatever, you know, a rose. They're all beautiful spirits, and they interact with us one way or another. But yeah, in terms of accessing them, it's interesting. I don't know if I accessed it directly because I don't remember the experience. You know, I remember what happened and I got the learning, but the experience itself, you know, is so profound and intense. It's hard for us to conceptualize it. And then we're in it. We're like, oh yeah, this is what it was. I remember now.
Right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Really.
And yeah, we're gonna dive in more about the integration, but let me ask you this question: that what happened to your depression and anxiety? Like, I mean, how are you feeling now in your life in terms of, do you still have any symptoms of that, or that is like something that is totally like gone from your life at this moment? How did your relationships with people change thanks to this experience?
Yeah, so it's interesting. That's an interesting question. What happened to my depression and anxiety? You know, so I'll answer that question in two ways. First of all, technically, it's gone. On a scale 1 to 10, I was a 10. I was suicidal. I had ideations. I had anxiety, depression, all of it, all the time. And now I have none of it. No depression, no real anxiety, maybe a 1. You know, I get anxious about some things, but nothing that really stays with me in any way. And what I think is the anxiety and the depression are still there, but they're part of that idea of Darren, that ego that I grew up with that created the story of that anxiety and depression. And I don't hold on to that anymore. You
Mm.
know, I still am the best parts of myself, the loving parts, the ingenuitive, you know, the creative parts, but the part that was that story, I don't attach to anymore. So in that sense, perhaps they're still there. They're like a pair of clothes that you don't wear anymore, you know, but I don't feel them on a day-to-day life basis at all.
That is amazing, you know, and we talk about this type of healings, you know, a lot with these medicines. Have you taken any medication before for these conditions?
I took Wellbutrin one time, and I took Paxil, and I took Ativan, and all of them were effective, but they also caused other problems. And I just said, I don't want to live taking these medications. So I stopped taking them. This was years
Okay,
ago because I had gone through depression for 30 years.
right. So you stopped taking them way before you come to the plants.
Yes, way before I came to the plan.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't taking
Just,
anything when I started.
yeah, just for our audience, because a lot of people come to me personally who are on severe medication for depression or anxiety. And, you know, part of this beautiful work is that you can, you know, let go of this medication. As the deeper healing occurs, you won't need, you know, this medication. So that's something I just wanted to point out. So how is your relationship with fear in general in your life? Because I think that's such a big question, especially now in the world. And of course, anxiety is just like underlying fear that you experience all the time. And I think, you know, that all of us carry fear to a certain extent. And, you know, in many cases that can be really debilitating in our life. So how did your relationships change towards fear or with fear, and how do you experience that now in your life?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll answer that question in two ways. First, in the sense that uh, I think I've always been a fearful person. I think that's just my nature to, you know, it's funny because people who know me would say, no, Darren's not fearful at all. Like he travels all these places, he does all these things. But, you know, there's the connection to your potential and the connection to how much you want to explore that. And that is where my fear lies, in the sense that there are things that I want to do that I need to be disciplined to do. And to do them, you have to make a commitment, like writing a book, writing more, creating content that can articulate the foundations for what I believe in. So in that sense, fear is there. Now, in another sense, fear to me has become a practice, in the sense that I know that, you know, I study Taoism, and the universe gives you gifts. And, you know, Osho has a wonderful book on this called The Joy of Living Dangerously. Beautiful book. And it's about this idea of embracing the risk, embracing the risks and the challenges the universe gives you. So they can be small, right? Someone sits next to you and you want to say something to them, but you say, no, I'm going to say something dumb. I don't want to embarrass myself. That's a fear, right? And you have to like say the universe presented this opportunity. So let me say something like, oh, that's an interesting book you're reading, or oh, you know, you have a small conversation with them. How do you like this thing that we're at, you know? And then that's it. It doesn't have to go further than that, but it's this thing of like crossing the threshold of putting yourself out there. Going to an event, people are dancing and they want you to dance. You know, it's afraid. People are afraid to dance, and like just saying, you know what, I'm just going to dance. I'm going to put myself out there. So these are small things that the universe presents that are practices in fear for you to say, I'm going to accept these things. And that's my practice. So fear for me is no longer a thing that exists, more in the sense that it's still there. It's just more of a practice for me to accept the challenges. And they've never not turned out well. I've
I
never
love
had,
that.
right. I know my instincts of when something isn't meant to be, but I also know that if I take on a challenge, it's never not turned out well. Never.
Right. I love that. And I truly believe that courage is really not the absence of fear, but fear the fear and do it anyway kind of thing. So, you know, what is dysfunctional when we are paralyzed by the fear and we are unable to act upon our knowing or an intuition. But as you said, you know, fear is just part of this existence, you know, where we live right now. And the question is what you're going to do with it. Will you allow it to stop you from pursuing your path, your dream, and to express who you are? Or will you just kind of confront them and just still do, you know, what you're called to do? And I used to have this practice many years in my life. I don't feel the need to do it anymore, that every year I would have like a challenge for myself, something I was really afraid to do, and I would do it. You know, for example, diving was one of the things. I'm very good swimmer. I love the water, but somehow I always had scared. I always was so scared of being underwater, you know, and breathing through a tube and all that kind of thing. So I moved here to Mexico, and here we have one of the most beautiful coral reefs in the world, very close to the shore. It's like 10 minutes with a boat. So I decided I'm going to go for that. And I almost stopped the course. I had a one-on-one course with an instructor, and it was here where I live in the water that I'm familiar with. And that fear was, you know, arising so much for me that there were classes when I couldn't go in the water, you know, and I was like, I was nauseous. I had diarrhea, you know, I was like freaking out so bad. And it was, you know, just this funny thing that just staying in the present and saying, no, I'm okay, I'm fine. You know, I could do all the things, you know, in the training that you have to do. I had no problem. It was just in my mind, the fear. There was no reason for me to be afraid. Nothing happened to me ever in the water. I was always safe. I didn't have any bad experiences. But that at one moment it was, you know, almost stopped me from going forward. And just these experiences in my life that I would just, you know, push through these fears and still do what I wanted to do, just helped me to change my relationship with fear. As you said, you know, that not allowing the fear to control me, but just remembering, you know, that I am the boss here, so to say. So thank you for sharing that. I think, you know, one of the most important things that people are interested in is in relationships, you know, because we are social beings and we exist in relationships. And to be honest, you know, I don't know many people who don't live in dysfunctional relationships. And I do not only mean, you know, romantic, but within family, even friendships, you know, working together with people. This is really, we are not a good place with that in the world. Can you talk a little bit about how did your relationship change in any ways with other people thanks to the experiences that you've been through? And if so, in what way?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say you're so right. Like, I think about this all the time, and obviously I do integration work with people and I see it. It's just, and I see it in the world, like, we're so bad to each other. We're so destructive to each other. And, you know, relationships, we find ourselves in relationships unconsciously because we're trying to heal ourselves through another person, or we're trying to complete something that we don't see ourselves able to do through another person. We project, right? And whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's our family, it's just this thing of there's a part of us that's not healed or not processed, that's suppressed, that is exercised through another person, whether it's triggers, whether it's projections. And I just see how destructive we are to each other. And it's so sad. it's so sad because we're all so beautiful and we have an opportunity to be beautiful with each other and to realize that, but we don't. We attack each other. In the sense of my relationships, you know, definitely on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say it's become a 1 in terms of how I am, you know, how I'm triggered by family or events or things or so many things, but I've let a lot of that go. And it's anytime, you know, because like I have an aunt and she's very intense. And I know that when you're around my aunt, who's a beautiful, wonderful, loving person, but when you're around her, she's going to trigger you. And I realize that when I'm around her, I say, well, first of all, I've chosen to be around Aunt Linda, but also that when the things come up, this is my work. You know, I don't need to hold on to her intensity or with something she's doing. And it's my work. It's not her work. And my reaction, and I've gotten much better at that. That's and friends and family. I've gotten much better of when the trigger comes up, I realize it's not their work. It's not for me to project onto them. It's for me to like sit with that and say, where did this come from? Why is this there? Does it serve me? And it's not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy. You know, Aunt Linda, my brother, my family, whatever. It's not easy, but that's the work. You know, no one will, you know, like Ram Dass used to say, you think you're enlightened, go home for Thanksgiving, you know?
Yeah,
And
I love that.
yeah, that's the work. That's the work. And so in that sense, it's just part of the practice for me. And sometimes I'm good at it and sometimes I fail at it. But for the most part, I'm so much better than I used to be.
Wow, thank you. This is so amazing. I think, you know, like lots of truth is being shared here. You know, one of that is not taking things personally. And I think, you know, I think Miguel Ruiz, you know, the 4 agreement, I think it's one of the agreements, you know,
Really?
and I think if you can live by that 4 agreements, then you are like pretty close to enlightenment, probably. So that's definitely, I can testify that, you know, you said something so beautiful in that podcast that I listened to. You said, we are all traumatized and triggered by each other's trauma, and we're just walking around like that, you know, unconsciously. And I so resonate with that. And in that state, you know, we are taking everything personal, we are blaming other people, we are projecting our pain onto other, and therefore perpetuating, you know, the suffering, what I call the chain of pain. And definitely one thing I really learned from this medicine is that, you know, looking at it in a different way. So changing my perspective on that and not being in that victim state and say, why is this happening to me? But asking rather the question, what can I learn from this experience? Why does this trigger me so much, you know? And going within and doing that work that you are referring to, this brings us closer to that inner peace. I feel, you know, I feel so much more peaceful compared to when I was in my 20s and I was just really, well, not in a place of peace, let's just say that. And this is an ongoing practice that probably we're going to do in our whole life, because as you mentioned, we are also so deeply traumatized, you know, and dysfunctional, you know, in a way that this requires, you know, a lot of clearing and letting go on for everybody, you know, and we are human beings. So as you said, you know, sometimes I'm better at it, sometimes I still fail, but at least, you know, I have a different perspective and I'm taking that responsibility for my experience instead of, you know, blaming others or staying in that victim mode that where we are powerless, you know, to create any change. So thank you for that. I really resonate with what you were saying. So you know,
But we are
yeah,
powerless as well. When we expect the other person to change, we are powerless. But when we do the inner work and say, you know what, maybe I should let this go. It doesn't serve me. And it's hard to let go because it's our story. But then we're not affected by it anymore. And it's like
right.
the fever goes away, you know?
So
It's
true.
counterintuitive.
So true. I experienced this many times in my life, that things that used to trigger me so much, you know, they become completely neutral as I did, you know, more healing work. And now it doesn't touch me at all. And that's something, you know, that we have control over, is our own experience. And in the last episode, I was talking about responsibility in terms of ability to respond in a conscious way, instead of reacting out of that wounding, you know, that we were describing earlier. And this is something, you know, that we can learn, we can all learn. And this amazing medicine, the ayahuasca, is called a teacher plant. So I want to just ask you about this, because many people look at this as some kind of magic pill, you know, that will take all your traumas away. This is the new God molecule that will fix everything in your life. But it's really, you know, the indigenous people, they call her a teacher plant. So you want to talk a little bit about this? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, this such a great question, because people say it all the time. La medicina, the medicine told me this, the medicine told me that. And you know, we call it the medicine because I think in indigenous cultures they call it la medicina. But it is, to me, and I think they would agree with this, it's a teacher. You know, if you think of what a teacher does, right? You think of teachers like our greatest teachers that stick in our minds and influenced us. They took a personal interest in us, right? Maybe they taught us dance or history or chemistry, but they took an interest in us and they said, hey, I can see you have this ability, you have this skill, you have this potential, and I'm going to teach you some more inside things, and I'm going to give you more perspective. And through that interest, we were able to really feel a connection, and we were able to really expand our learning and our perspective. So in that sense, there is no greater teacher than ayahuasca. Because think about how customized it is, what a personal interest it takes in us. What ayahuasca does is it goes in our personal experience. It allows us to process it. It allows us to release it. It allows us to feel it in a safe way. It shows us the perspective of not only ourselves, but of others that were involved in the experience. It shows us how things are. It shows us how the universe is. There is no more personal perspective, personal interest than what ayahuasca does with each of us. No experience is the same. There's similarities, but they're all unique to us. And in that sense, that is the greatest teacher, you know. And there's another reason why I call it a teacher. Number one, that reason, that it takes that interest in us. Like medicine doesn't work like that. Medicine solves a problem. You know, teachers, they say, okay, here's the curriculum, here's the learning, here's the perspective, here's the insights based on that. And that's what ayahuasca does to me. The other perspective on this, which is very important to me, is when we take a medicine, we expect whenever we feel sick to be able to go back to that medicine. You know, I have a fever, I'm going to take a Tylenol. I have a fever, I'm going to take a Tylenol, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's not how ayahuasca works. Ayahuasca, it teaches us something. And then from that, we have to do the work. You know, I always say, people say, I'm ready to go back to the medicine. And I'm like, you should do the work. Like, it gave you the homework. It showed you the perspective. Now the homework is out there. There's continuing education, you know. There's other teachers that you can find on YouTube. There's books you can read. There's people you can connect with. There's integration work you can do. And I think that in that sense, it's not a medicine. It's not something that we should keep going back to. It's not gonna, a lot of people will say, I keep getting more knowledge from it. But what do you do with that knowledge? Knowledge is like a fire. A fire is stoked, and then from there you have to grow the fire. You have to keep putting wood on it. You have to blow it. You have to tend it, and it will grow, and it will give heat, and it will become powerful. And that's what we have to do with this knowledge that we get from these journeys. You know, just to say it's a medicine and, oh, I feel sick again, let me go back. I think we're wasting a wonderful opportunity to grow.
Yes, thank you. You're talking from my heart. Absolutely.
Yes, this is where we're connected, because you.
Yeah, we are the healers. You know, there is no force, I truly believe, outside of us that can help us heal. It's only us. And I think what is beautiful with this medicine, that it shows us the way. It shows us what you need to work on, you know, what is not serving you. It can guide us how to release it. But as you said, you either apply that insight and wisdom, what you receive through these journeys, or not. And it's really a big difference between intellectual knowledge and application and embodiment. And I think we all know that. We all have habits that you think you know you shouldn't do it, you know, but you still do it, and vice versa. So just because we know something, it doesn't mean that we are acting upon it, and we are applying that knowledge. And I definitely agree that that's what makes a difference in people's life, to apply what you learn, what you're going to do with that, what you learn, how you're going to apply that in your life, as you said, every day, in your relationship, when you're triggered, and my journey with this medicine, it's almost 10 years now. It's just, I haven't drank medicine the last 2.5 years, and I do not feel the need. And one of the teachings of the mother to me was that the purpose is not to have more medicine. Once you're healed, once you're integrated, you don't need. Now, there are other scenarios, because I know it's trigger for a lot of people. If you're training to be a shaman, a space holder, so on and so forth, there are other reasons why you might go and have more ceremonies. But in terms of healing, I have personally experienced with clients who drank only one time and did the integration and did the work that they needed to do, and completely turned around their life and completely healed and recovered. We have an episode on my podcast with Libby, so check it out, to our audience, if you want to hear her story. And it's really, I truly believe that the goal is to get back our power, over our life, and not to rely on any plant, any medicine, any therapist. Eventually these things are allies and guides that can help us to get back to that state of wholeness and empowerment, when you can navigate your life with ease and confidence, even in the stressful situation, even in the overwhelm, even in the intensity that we all experience, because that's not going to stop. So that's another wishful thinking. I think that people think that, oh, I'm going to have no more challenges now in my life, but that's simply not true. The question is how you're going to deal with those challenges. You're going to completely fall apart and be destructive and go down, into the darkness, or you're going to learn, to ride the waves and navigate your experience in a more empowered way. So we cannot emphasize this enough. The embodiment of what you learn from the medicine and the application of it is completely up to us. And this is very important for people to understand, because I think coming from the West, we have this conditioning that if you have a problem, take a pill for your troubles, and we are just conditioned this way. And certainly I was very naive. And when I started with the medicine, I drank a lot of medicine without integration, because at that time, I haven't even heard about integration. I didn't even know the concept. So, and what happened to me is I was just going deeper and deeper, digging up more stuff, without integrating. And I come to complete breakdown, dissolution of identity. That was a very scary place for me to be. And well, not saying it was not necessary, because this made me who I am. And obviously, it all makes sense in retrospect, but I definitely think that now I'm wiser, I wouldn't do it that way, certainly. And so the amount of medicine that people drink it's not true that the more is the better. It's absolutely not true. What is true is that what you're going to do with your experience and how you're going to apply that in your life. So if you have anything else to add to it before we go on for the next question.
Yeah, I just want to say that, I do understand how some people will go back, because, there's, like, for myself, I worked with 3 plants, and I probably had about, in a 2-year session, probably 5 sessions, 6 sessions with the different plants, 6 journeys. And I do understand that. It's just a sense that some people will start to say that number, right? I've done ayahuasca 70 times or 80 times. I've sat with the teacher, with the medicine 70 times. And I think, what are you doing at that point? You're moving away from the work of the medicine or the work of the plant. And yeah. And it's funny what you said about the disillusionment. I've been there too, where it's like, well, who am I? What am I? What is the universe? And that's where we need ourselves. That's where we need our ego. We always talk about ego death and wanting to crush the ego, but no, we need the ego, because the ego is our anchor that, brings us back to, oh, this is what it is. This is how I experience the world. It's
Right.
unique. It's unique.
Yeah, and another thing that we always talk about in the integration is this dark night of the soul, and this medicine is called the wine of the dead. And what people go through is based on my experience working on myself and with people, is really a death and rebirth process. And first there is the death, there is the everything that needs to be let go of and needs to that doesn't serve us. And then is the rebirth. So I always explain to people that things will get worse before they get better, and that's just part of the process. And to do this deep shadow work, it requires courage. It requires openness, willingness, commitment, strong desire to heal and change your life. So what is your definition of this shadow? Like, how do you see that, and what do you like? Yeah, what is your definition of shadow work?
Yeah, so to me, the shadow is the unconscious parts of ourselves that we're not aware of, but we embody. So for example, if I see a homeless person and I'm triggered by them, it could be because I'm triggered by my own thoughts of failure or not succeeding or lazy. Not lazy. I don't mean to project onto a homeless person, but this is how a person might think. The powerlessness. I'm triggered by powerlessness, or so there are parts of ourselves that, to me, the shadows develop because we as children, we want to be loved. Like, this is what we seek, is love. And we start to develop the shadow in terms of, this is what will get us love and this is what will not get us love. So maybe if I'm too loud, maybe if I'm too talkative, maybe if I'm not perfect, I'm not good enough, I won't get love. So we reject those parts of ourselves. And when we see it in others, we're triggered by it because it exists in us. And we want to reject it wholeheartedly. And we see the shadow. I believe it's been weaponized by the political parties, especially one party in particular. I believe it's been weaponized by the media, Fox News. They've taken parts of this idea of freedom and other people, like, they can take things from us, and they've used these to monetize and weaponize people's feelings. So instead of people doing the work of saying, why am I triggered by this thing? Now they have a place to project it onto, which is a very dangerous and very sad thing. But I think shadow work is at the heart of this plant work. I think this is what the plants reveal to us. And shadow work is the most rewarding work a person can do, is trying to understand the parts of themselves that are unconscious and to bring them to consciousness and to forgive them in ourselves. Because if we forgive them in ourselves, we can't blame someone else for having them.
Yeah.
We have accepted that we have.
Yes, absolutely. So making the unconscious conscious. And I think that's one of the big parts of the teaching of this medicine, is shining the light of awareness to these unconscious parts of us that are hidden, but we can see the effects, as you said, in our lives and in the world. So we know that it's there, but we are not consciously aware. And when we are not consciously aware, we are in that ignorance that there is no choice there. For me, that's bondage. There is no freedom. There is just repetition. It's just reaction. We talked about this. And so really, really, I think, this medicine for me is really helped me to go towards that liberation and that true freedom, which is freedom of choice. And we cannot be truly free when we are ignorant and we are not aware of these things in the shadow. There was this wonderful book, The Women Who Ran with Wolves, Dr. Pinkola Estes. I think she is also Hungarian origin. So many good people from Hungary. And I remember it's a very dense book, it took a long time for me to read, but I really recommend to the audience, if you are into these topics. It's a wonderful book. And I remember that her first rule of living was that predators exist. And she was talking about how when we are children, we are innocent, which is that beautiful, that essence of innocence that we all have and we all come in with, but also we are naive. And when we are naive, we are vulnerable. And when we believe that everybody is a loving being and there are no predators, we are vulnerable because we are not aware of that darkness, of that shadow. So from her perspective, one of the big step in psychological emotional maturation was understanding that the predator exists, which is what we talk about, that the shadow exists and we have a shadow, and that is there. And without this, there is no change, no transformation, no liberation. And once we got to that point that, okay, that is exist, then as you said earlier, what we're going to do about it. And that's something, that really happens in the integration process, like after the ceremony. So if you want to share a little bit about what are your personal tools for integration for yourself and for your clients when you are assisting others, what kind of tools and practices do you use to help people to integrate their experience, to integrate that shadow, to process trauma that is arising, thanks to this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I personally have so many tools. Like dance is a wonderful one. I know you're a dancer as well. I saw the tango, I think you did. That's a beautiful dance. And to me, dance is such a wonderful integration tool because number one, we fear it often, right? So that is in itself its own little tool of facing a fear. And then, we're so disembodied, especially North Americans. We're so removed from our bodies. We can't feel certain parts of our bodies. Trauma is trapped within our bodies and it's locked our bodies into place. And I feel that dance is such a wonderful expression of the soul and the heart. And oh man, it's beautiful. I think it's one of the most beautiful integration tools. I have so many simple ones. Cleaning. I think cleaning is a wonderful integration tool. Meditation, obviously. I give money to homeless people. This is a practice of mine. I don't give it to them in the sense that I'm trying to be a good person. I give it to them in the sense of, how does this make me feel? Do I feel like I'm a big shot? Do I feel like I'm triggered by this person? Do I feel like people are watching me? And these are ways to bring out the subtle ego. So this is like an integration tool. Looking people in the eye is a very powerful integration tool, like really looking at people and like saying, well, how do I feel? Do I feel like I want to avert my eyes? Do I feel triggered? Do they feel triggered by me? Can I look at them and really see them? This is a wonderful integration tool. Walking and things like that. But I think just in general, showering is an integration tool, eating, in the sense that, eating is one of the most unconscious things we do. We put a bowl down and we blah, 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 and then we're done. And we didn't even know what we ate. And like really sitting there eating and tasting the food and allowing yourself to be in the moment of eating is a meditation. So to me, integration, when you talk about tools and what integration is, it means two things to me. It means awareness, like bringing things to constant awareness. So you're constantly conscious. And it also means the process of living. Integration is the process of living. I think with this plant work, we always focus on healing, which is very important. We have to heal first. You have to heal. But after you're through healing, you have to live. And people get stuck in the healing. They always want to heal themselves or heal others or gain more knowledge. After a point, you want to live. You want to dance. You want to do things that you've been afraid to do. You want to travel. You want to put yourself out there. You want to grow. You want to be courageous. And this is the second part of this work. And to me, that's what integration is. It's that process of now healing and living.
That's really beautiful. Like I use a model of, human beings of having physical body, mental body, emotional body, spiritual body. So you talked a lot about, the physical aspect, the integration, and issues are in the tissues. This is so true. Trauma is stored in the body. So different movement practices for you is dance. I use somatic experiencing, to help my clients, yoga therapy. But it can be any kind of movement, like in dance, 5 rhythms and this type of modalities, movement medicine, and just movement is medicine, and to move the body and to ground into our bodies and be connected to our bodies. I think it's very important, that we have tools for that. And as you said, on the mental level, just presence and just be present, because we are so not present. Most people are totally not present and checked out most of the day, most of their lives. Just as you described, just small things as eating or showering, just be there, be there. That's what is meditation, is to be present. You don't have to sit cross-legged, and for an hour. But yeah, it's just, just be present with what you're doing. That's what meditation is. But that's challenging, for a lot of people. I do a lot of work with working with unconscious core beliefs, and changing perspective and working with belief systems. I use the method of Byron Katie, the work that is really helpful for people. So that's something, that our audience can check out to work, rewire, belief systems and neural pathways, because we are wired to think in a certain way that is not necessarily true or serving us. What about, the emotional aspects? Because, you went through serious trauma in your life, as you explained, and most people I work with are, carry severe trauma, abuse, so on and so forth. And my experience is that a lot of people go into emotional release, after these experiences, when suppressed emotions come to the surface, or even memories of trauma that they were not aware because it was so deeply suppressed in their unconscious. I just had like a new client. It was like a spiritual emergency. Like, she was just keep going from ceremony to ceremony with the intention to heal, because she was really feeling that her life was off and she had a lot of anger and so on and so forth. And then one of the ceremonies, after one of the last ceremonies that she did, memory came back to her that she couldn't remember about sexual abuse within the family by her father, and she was in a state of shock. And I experienced this like many times, that people have memories surfaced of severe trauma, and they go into a state of shock, they go into emotional release. So do you have any tools, to help your clients process this?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think as a coach, as Carl Jung said, he said, right, like, know all the techniques, know all the training, but in the end, just be a human soul touching another human soul. And I think as coaches, we have to be empty, and we have to be souls, human souls, and like really see the person, to see, okay, what questions can I ask? What kind of, because as a coach, I try to create a container for them to then do the work and pull things out. And my job is to, like, what are the questions I can ask them? How far are they ready to go? How much can we pull out? And, I want to, like, sometimes you can see the picture that they're not allowing themselves to see. So I try to bring it out, and I try to, like, bring it out in a safe place, because I've learned as a coach, you learn, right, that you can't reveal too much truth at once. You have to be careful about how much truth you reveal to a person, but you have to reveal just enough so that they feel it and they start to release it. And because this is where the healing will come from, is the release of these truths, these things that we've been suppressing. At the same time, sometimes people just aren't ready. I know I've taken people very far, and then they recede, and they're not ready to go further in that. And as a coach, I know that, like, that's just where they're at. And, we've gone as far as we can go, perhaps. And when they're ready, maybe we'll go further, or maybe I'm not the right coach for them. But they, it's ultimately the person that is going to dictate where it will go. All we can do is create the container and ask the right questions and have a sense of how much we can bring out to do the healing and where we should explore. But ultimately, it's the person that's going to allow it, whether it's us as a coach or ayahuasca.
Right. I really resonate with that. And I think that's one of the most important thing, for any guide or therapist, is to create a safe container where healing can happen, because I think that people feel extremely scared to go towards the darkness and towards the trauma, which is absolutely natural and normal and understandable. So creating a container when they can feel safe to touch these places, I think it's one of the major function of any guide for therapists who is holding space for this deep inner healing work. And what you said as well, just to be present. And I was talking in my last podcast with Dr. Scott, how when I'm a psychologist by trade, I'm not practicing classical psychology anymore, but that's what I studied. And I remember when I came out of the university, I used to have this like 2 pages of questionnaire for people. And the first session with people was just me interrogating them about their family history and medical history and so on and so forth. And at the same time, I would already made up my mind what's wrong with them, what they should do about it. And, you know, it was just so much, you know, and now, as you said, it's just being empty in a way of putting all this aside and your ideas, what is going on with the other person or what they need, and just being in that presence that you also talked about before as part of your personal integration, but also as a guide, as a therapist, to be completely present. Because I think that even though I am trained in so many modalities, you know, that I cannot even count, but ultimately, I don't think you can prepare for everything, because as you said, all people are different, and you don't know what's going to surface, you know, there is no way of knowing. So many times, you know, when I had intense experiences with a client and something happened that never happened in a session before, and I had no, you know, knowledge from a book or from a practice, okay, if this happens, this is what you're going to do. Then the only thing, you know, that really helped me is to go into that place of prayer and presence with the intention that I'm here to serve this person to the best of my ability, and what can I do to help this person in this moment. And that connection for me with the medicines, with source energy, with God, whatever we want to call it, that is, you know, that I can access in any given moment in time, and I always know what to do. And sometimes I do not even conscious of what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. I'm just doing it, and it just works, you know. But this is something I think that people definitely have to develop, you know, to have this capacity to go there and to let go of our preconceived idea of what people need, you know, and just truly come from this place of love and compassion and healing of, I am here to serve you. How can I help you in this moment? And what can I do to make this easier for you? And if we can be at that place, we know what to do in that moment. So yeah, thank you.
It's very hard. It's very hard. That's part of my practice as well, is like as a coach, you know, just what comes up for me as I'm talking to the client, can I let that go, you know, not be part of this conversation. It's being a coach is very, very hard. You do it in a sense that you're really trying to be from this empty place and create this container. It's really hard.
Yeah, it's a practice in itself, or spiritual practice. I always say to people that, you know, my healing was greatly because I became a healer. So, you know, at the beginning of my life, I thought, you know, that I have the worst life ever, you know, and nobody suffered as much as I did. And then you start dealing with people, you know, with trauma, and you start realizing, oh my gosh, you know, I am not the only one who suffers. And then from here, we come to what you mentioned earlier, that we all suffer. You know, we are all extremely traumatized as a human family, you know, and this trauma goes back to generations, you know, and accumulates, you know, and we carry that trauma. And that is absolutely not true. What people used to believe, that you come into this world and you are like a tabula rasa and you are like a blank sheet. That is not true. You are carrying, you know, memories from your lineage. You are carrying trauma the same way you carry DNA. You carry trauma of your country, of your nation, of the land where you grew up. So that might be another conversation going into the collective aspect. But my point is here that there is a lot to deal with, you know, definitely. And this is the age of healing, right? The age of Aquarius. That's why we are here. I really loved, you know, you talked a lot about in the previous podcast that we're going to share the link to about surrender and acceptance and how that had you in your journey. And I'm sure, you know, many people who you work with. So can you just say a little bit about what does that mean to you and how does it relate to awakening and to healing yourself?
Yeah. So surrender is at the heart of everything. And surrender, if you think about it in a way, is being unconscious. Like when you don't surrender, you are unconsciously fighting something, you know, whether with your body. Like think about when we try to go into a stretch in yoga and we can't go into the stretch. Well, if there's a trick that if you stand up and then go back into the stretch, you'll be able to go into it because your body, you fooled your body into thinking you stopped the stretch, but then you go back into it. And really what's happened is we are mentally and emotionally blocking that stretch. So to allow anything to happen, we have to surrender to it. Anything. I always know when a client is ready to talk. They've surrendered. They're like, yeah, I want to change this. I'm tired of it, you know. And going into a journey, it's the same way. Going into my own journey, I know that I was ready for those mushrooms. That's why I took 7 grams by myself, because I said, if this doesn't work, you know, I'm going to end it all. And I was ready to surrender. And that's the best place to be in life in general. That's what Taoism is surrender to the flow of life, to finding the flow of life and surrendering to it. Because, you know, we fight life, we fight things so much, whether or not we realize it. And when we just surrender to it, we're able to hear it, we're able to experience it, we're able to taste it, we're able to get the insights from it. I recently had COVID. I just had COVID. For about 10 days, I was in the COVID experience. And I can tell you, it's physically one of the most difficult things I've ever been through. I've had yellow fever, and COVID was as difficult as that. And I surrendered to it. I realized, like, yeah, I'm just going to surrender, let it be. I'm going to stop fighting this. And from that, I was able to gain so many beautiful insights and learning. And I will say that I never want to get that disease again, but I'm grateful that I got it so I can understand what others feel. And also the learning and the insights I got from it, it had to do with surrender. So surrender is a wonder. It's at the heart of everything. Any learning will come from surrender. And it's a wonderful practice to try to, and it's very nuanced. It's very subtle. So it's hard to do. It's a wonderful practice to really try to get into.
Yeah, and it's the opposite of control that we are conditioned to do. You know, you are conditioned to control every facet of your life and to be in control. And this is so part of the conditioning. So to kind of go against your conditioning and to voluntarily surrender, it requires great courage, you know, and great willingness, as you said. And I would like to share with our audience that I struggled with that, you know, for a long time, because I'm sharing this experience because I believe many people can relate that for me, surrender was, you know, giving over to something outside of myself. Is that God or an image of God or another person or a situation, whatever. So in my mind for a long time, as I understood surrender is to give my control over to something outside of me. And when, you know, my journey started with the medicine, actually still at the beginning when I was in Peru, I learned, you know, from one of my experience that surrender is really giving over to my higher self, to the divine within me. This is not something that I'm giving over outside of me, but I'm the way I understood, you know, was that I'm giving up I understand that my limited human mind is not able to understand, you know, and to interpret the mystery of life. But there is a part of me who is divine, who is infinite, who is all knowing. And for me, surrender in that moment became, you know, giving over my mind, my limited mind, to that divine within me. And that completely changed my perspective on it. And that resistance that I had against surrender before that, because I had this perspective, that is something outside of me, and I didn't want to give it, over to anything outside of me. And then I understood that actually it's not something outside of me, it's within me. It's the greater part of me. It's the only true part of me that I'm surrendering to, not another person, not a shaman, not a God, not something external, but that divine flame, that true self within me. I am surrendering my limited human mental concepts and ego to that part of me that completely eased that resistance that I had, and I was able, then to voluntarily surrender. So can you relate to that?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to articulate it. I've never really thought of it that way, but I absolutely resonates that idea of we're surrendering to a higher part of ourselves. I think that's a really beautiful way to articulate it.
Okay, so awesome. So two more questions I have before we wrap up today. So freedom. I think, freedom, we all want to be free. This is even, more kind of coming into the forefront for everybody, I think, on this planet in these days. What does freedom mean to you? Like, how do you define freedom?
Yeah, yeah. Well, in one sense, you can talk about surrender, right? The idea of surrendering to your higher self. I think that's just a great way to put that. There's different freedoms. There's financial freedom. There's, health freedom, physical freedom, right? So there's those type of freedoms, which are, I guess, a hierarchy of needs. But then there's also the freedom to be free of society and to be free of culture and to be free of others' expectations on you or society's expectations. We all have expectations as a man, as a woman, as a North American, as a person working in healing work. It's just so many expectations that are put upon us by culture, which is a collective of egos. And to realize I don't have to be, that's not me. That culture is not who I am. It doesn't define me. I am who I am. As Osho always said, I love this. I love Osho. He's so smart. He's so misunderstood. He's the smartest man, one of the smartest humans who ever lived, I think. And he always said this thing of your religion should be yourself. Ninaism should be your religion and Darrenism should be my religion. And I believe that. I believe that that's freedom, is finding out who we really are and honoring that and exploring that and not being constrained by others' expectations. I think that's real freedom.
I really resonate with that. The way I kind of verbalize it for myself is freedom from inner limitations that prevent me from being who I am. And this is all that what you said, just the concepts that we are learned, while we were growing up, conditioning, expectation of others, who we think we should be, so on and so forth. That is not who we truly are. And for me, let go of these internal limitations that is mostly in the mind for me, that are limiting, my experience to embody, that being who I am, because I am who I am. We don't have to acquire that. We don't have to learn to be that. We already are. But how I experience is that on top of who I am, there is like all these concepts and all these shadows and all the trauma that is kind of preventing or limiting me to embody that essence, who I am. And for me, freedom is to let go of these limitations that are between me, and who I'm embodied, in my everyday life, and who I truly am. And that is sometimes, there is a gap between. So to kind of close that gap, that's what freedom means to me. And also for me, it means peace. Freedom for me has a lot to do with peace and no fear. I really believe that fear is something that we learn. I don't feel that fear is something that we are. I think what we are is love, and fear is something that we learn. And that's good news for me, because what you learn, you can unlearn. Well, who you are, that's it, right? Who you are. So what does love mean to you?
Well, before I answer that, I want to add two more freedoms that are very important that I forgot about. I have learned to free myself from space and time. So I'll give an example of time. Time meaning, I'm 46, I think. And, I thought, I want to be in a relationship at this age, or I want to have these type of things, or I want to have a child. And like, maybe that won't happen, but that's fine because time is infinite. And I am this infinite thing that will come back. So if it doesn't happen now, it may happen at another time, and I don't need to constrain myself this idea that I need to get it done by this time or I'm going to fail. And the idea of space, that something happens to my body and it's constricting me because we're all getting older, right? We're all losing ability in our body, and it used to really distress me. And now I'm like, it's just a body. It's just space. It'll, it's going to die. I'm going to the internal thing is eternal and it's boundless. It's not tied to space or time. So those two freedoms are very funny and very subtle. And like people talk to me about it sometimes, and I think they're a bit spooked by how I think about it, but I don't constrain myself by space and time anymore. And it's been a really wonderful freedom, that letting those things go. So you asked about love. I think
that's another, just such a huge topic, and these are questions that now I'm asking everybody because it's a little discovery. Actually, Osho has amazing book, How to Love Without Fear. I think I really recommend it to our audience that you read that book, because I do believe, I know from my experience, I didn't understand what love is for a long time. And I don't want to claim that I fully understand it now, but I think I have a better understanding, let's say, that I had before. And, one of my core beliefs was for a long time that love hurts. And this is just the most fucked up thing, that you can believe. And it took me a long time to kind of discern in my life and in my mind that what is hurting me is not love, that love is not hurting. Love heals, love brings things together. Love is the cure, love is the medicine. And what people do in the name of love sometimes to inflict pain or suffering, that has nothing to do with love. So I think, we have to do a lot of clearing around this topic. So that's why I'm asking you this question. What does it mean for you?
Yeah. So, I'll very simply define love, because I think about this a lot. I've asked myself this in a journey, what is love? And to me, love is the absence of separation. I think it's a definition that you can apply to anything. Like when you think of a child and the mother feels connected to the child. They feel that deep love. So that is an absence of separation. When you think of soldiers at war, they talk about loving their fellow soldiers because they feel connected to their fellow soldiers. They don't feel disconnection. They don't feel you're this race or you're this ethnicity. They feel like we're all soldiers trying to do this together. You think of a sports team, you think of relationships that have ever felt really deep. It's because there's been an absence of separation. We feel connected, and I think if you think about our own journeys with plants, it's that really deep love that we feel, where we feel we're connected to everything. We feel the connection. And, when you said before that fear is learned and we are love, I agree with you. I agree that if you technically look at what we are, which are atoms and molecules and quarks, we're the same thing as everything, as plants, as space. We're all the same thing. We just have an individual expression. So in that sense, technically, there is no separation. We've created it through our concepts of ourselves and obviously our physical self, but physically, technically, we're the same thing as everything. So there is no disconnection. And the idea that we learn fear, obviously, we live in a world that can be dangerous. So we learn not to touch the hot stove. We learn not to do this. These are fears. And we learn these things. But like you say, we can let them go and surrender and be this connection with everything. And I think when you get into the deepest parts of meditation or these journeys, these plant journeys, you feel that gratitude and that connection, and it touches you like a nerve, and it's a beautiful place to be. So that's what I think love is.
So well said. If I would have to find a synonym for love, I would say connectedness as well. And definitely to our audience, this plant, the Mother Ayahuasca, I've seen it in my life. And literally all the people that I know who work with this medicine in a conscious, responsible way with the intention of healing and awakening themselves to allow us to remember this connectedness and to experience it, because it's different when you have, again, intellectual concept that, oh, we are all connected, but you do not feel it, you feel separate. And I had this client, and it was so funny that after his first ceremony, I asked, what was your takeaway from this experience? And he said that, for me, the earth before, it was a picture on a sheet in a two-dimensional book or something, and now it is a living being that I'm intimately connected to. And that was just like, it was just, I think, such a good metaphor that he brought. And I see people, to embody this connectedness. A lot of the people I work with, they moved out of cities. They just cannot live in a city anymore. They become so conscious about nature. Their lifestyle completely changes, that honors nature, that these people don't need to have laws or rules to not put poison in the river, because they know that the river feeds us, and it's part of us, and we are intimately connected. So their lifestyle changes, to make more conscious choices with the awareness that we are all connected here, and just because my fence is here, I cannot throw the trash over and pretend that that's not going to affect me. It's just ridiculous. But I think, that we become so disconnected. And I grew up in a city. I grew up in Budapest, in the capital city of Hungary, in a concrete building on the 9th floor. And I was somewhat lucky because my parents and my grandparents had a house in the country, and I would go and visit, many times, like in the weekends and the summer breaks. But still, I was so disconnected. I remember when I was a child, I was freaked out with bugs and just nature in general. I was fearful, I didn't have that experience, and it took me a while, to come back. And now it's completely the opposite. I cannot be in a hotel where you cannot open a window because I'm like not feeling good about it. I need to hear the noises of nature and the birds and sounds and be connection with nature. Otherwise I feel stressed, and it's so funny how it changed. Like, do you have experience with that?
Oh yeah, no, of course. Yeah. You, yeah, 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 yeah. It's deep. I mean, not only in the sense of nature, but in the sense of what we do to nature, this beautiful spirit that exists. But yeah, I mean, I always tell people, like, a really wonderful integrative practice is go take off your shoes and go walk in nature. Go find a forest, a national forest or a trail, and just go walk in it, and you will heal. No one has ever felt worse doing that walk, So yeah,
Yeah.
nature.
Yes, and nature has this harmonious vibration. I feel when I am in nature, it's so much easier to come back to that harmony because everything around me vibrating in that harmonious level. Why when I'm in a city, the noises, the everything is disharmonious. So it greatly affects me, and I think for me personally, it's much more challenging to be centered in a city than to be centered in where I live, or when I'm in nature. It's just, I just sit down and I'm instantly connected. I'm instantly centered. So yeah, I love what you said. And nature is a big healer, and just, any kind of nature you can find, even if you don't work with medicine, you can just use nature still, but especially, after these journeys, this is something that can greatly help, the integration process. Many people are into this medicine work now, and I'm happy to see that more people are becoming just guide and helpers for other people on their journey. I think it's kind of like a natural way of, the wounded healer. You set out to heal yourself, and when you find relief from your pain and your life does get better, and you do get more happy and more peaceful and more content and more connected, there is a natural desire, I think, that arises for you to help other people to go there as well and to ease their suffering. And as in any areas, there are a lot of people in the medicine field as well who are not in integrity with what they are doing or what they are saying. And I think that can affect, a lot, that safe container that we were talking about. So what does it mean to you to be in integrity as a healer, as a coach, as somebody who is serving others? Like, how does that look like in your life?
I think this is very simple. I think that you as a healer, you have to do your own work. You always have to do your own work. You have to have a practice of doing your work, because a lot of healers are trying to heal others, heal themselves through others. And they get the spiritual ego, right? The worst ego there is, the spiritual ego. No, maybe not the worst, but it's definitely a difficult, insidious ego. And you have to do your own work and stay grounded. And because I see at Soul Quest, I see it a lot of places, people will, now they become healers and they want to heal others, and they just throw everything into that, and now that loses its boundary. That becomes their new thing. Before it was alcohol, then workaholism, then CrossFit, and now it's healing. And you have to do your own work. You're a person as well. Just the person you want to save, you are also that person. And I think it's always important for a person to do their own work. And I think when you do your own work, you're going to be more effective for others. Ram Dass, he has a couple podcasts on this that are really wonderful, where he talks about you have to be empty. You can't, and that's the work of anything. You want to be empty no matter what you do. But he said to really do this work well, when you're empty, the universe can speak through you versus you speaking. And that's a beautiful thing when it happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that is absolutely a requirement, it's just basic for me. I don't know how anybody could guide somebody without their having their own experiences, especially in this world of plant medicine and non-ordinary states of consciousness. I believe you cannot study this from a book. You cannot learn, simply because what we said, you need to have confidence to hold that safe place, and confidence comes from experience. I'm pretty astounded. I looked at some psychedelic assisted therapist training in the United States, and there are a couple of trainings where they don't ask the therapist to have their own experience with the substance that they are working with, which is, I find, absolutely outrageous. I recommend to our audience, if you are, looking for a therapist or a coach, in the field of plant medicine, connect with the person, listen to the person, as you're listening to this podcast. This is a good start. You can, feel resonance or non-resonance with people based on how they express themselves, what they are saying. But I think most importantly, look at what they do and how they live their life, because that's ultimately, what shows, how much they walk that talk. And that doesn't mean people have to be perfect. As you said, like, we are humans. I am on my journey, you're on your journey. I can have certain people who are coming kind of after me on the path, so I'm like more ahead, so obviously, and I'm learning from other people who are on the same path more ahead. It's just natural and it's normal. And I always feel that I am a student and a teacher at any given time. But I feel, that coming from psychology and like literally, like I had in the university of learning from books that were written by people. I remember particularly one of the books we have to read was Rousseau's Back to Nature, which was considered the basis of modern education. It was the book that everybody learned from. And this man who wrote this book of how to educate children had like 9 children who he gave them up and put them in a foster care. Like, this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking integrity, that people can write a book about a concept and then look at their life, what they are doing, what they did with their own children, that it's like such a huge divide. So, you know, I would just really recommend to your audience that if you're working with any kind of people, just look for intuitive resonance first, and also observe their behavior, look at their life, look at their relationships, you know, and look what they do, because that's what ultimately will show you, you know, how well we walk that talk, so to say. And that's what it means to me. So I just wanted to add that. And just for, you know, to finish for today, we're going to have another conversation because we have more than half of the questions we didn't go through, but that just means, you know, that it was a very juicy and rich conversation. So anything for you right now that you would like to share with our audience, that you would like to put out into the vortex, you know, just to finish for today?
No, you know, I thought this was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I echo what you said. You know, if you're going to work with an integration coach, talk to them, have a conversation first, and see, do they resonate with you? Do their beliefs resonate with you? Because that's ultimately, you know, what's going to help you is if you feel resonance, like not their licenses or training, you know, all these things don't mean much. It's who they, you know, how they connect with you. So yeah, I really agree. But no, I really enjoyed this conversation and really appreciate what you do as well. You know, I heard you at the peak meeting and I instantly connected, you know, especially when you said the goal is not to take more medicine. I said, oh, you know, finally someone agrees. So this is I agree, you know, the goal is to heal. The goal is to heal. And really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you, Darren. So nice to have you here today, and more is yet to come. And to our audience, like, thank you for listening. Please like the video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Healing and Awakening with Nina Izel. Check out my book on Amazon or on my website called Heart Medicine, Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy and the Integration Process, and lots of free content on my website, avatarhealingarts.com. And I just want to put out there, we are having a new project with another amazing medicine woman, my sister, Bonnie Divina Mao, and we are doing this workshop each month called Healing the Mother Wound, and especially centering around birth trauma, as we all being born into this world through a mother, through a womb, you know, and that is something that creates a basic imprint, you know, a major wiring. And me working with trauma for over 20 years, I think, you know, that the birth experience and it has a major effect on our life. So the idea of creating this space each month is to bring people together and do this work together, because as we said earlier, sometimes it is scary to go to these places alone. So we are creating this safe container, so you can check it out on my website, and hope you can join us. The more the merrier. We are building up this platform, so healing the mother wound, healing our relationship with the feminine essence, also the masculine, obviously it's automatically getting healed, you know, as we heal the feminine. So hope see you there. The next one is 28th of August, Saturday morning. So please check that out, and sending you lots of love and light from our hearts to your heart. And I hope you have a wonderful and magical day.